If you thought yesterday was bad, it's not getting any better for the president. Yesterday, he stormed out of the SCOTUS hearing that he attended to try and put his finger on the scale. Now this happened. It's a week of ills for the man who said that he likes to hang around with losers.
What is missing in leadership?
Well, it's winning. You got to win. You know, I've watched a lot of people, leaders, great leaders. And, you know, the one thing about sports is you break it down into, you know, a 2-hour period, something nice. You don't have to wait a lifetime to find out is somebody a winner or a loser. You got a lot of losers, mostly losers, fortunately. It's a good thing to have a lot of losers. I always like to hang around with losers, actually, because it makes me feel better.
A federal judge has agreed to permanently block the Trump administration from implementing a presidential directive to end federal funding for National Public Radio and the Public Broadcasting Service. A U.S. district judge ruled Tuesday that President Donald Trump's executive order to cease funding for NPR and PBS is unlawful and unenforceable. The judge says the First Amendment right to free speech, quote, does not tolerate viewpoint discrimination and retaliation of this type. Last year, Trump said at a news conference that he would love to defund NPR and PBS.
I would love to do that. I think it's very unfair. It's been very biased with the whole group. I mean, the whole group of them.
NPR claims the Republican president wants to punish it for the content of its journalism.
Ruling from a federal judge today ordering a 14-day halt to construction of President Trump's White House ballroom. The judge says the president cannot build the ballroom without authorization from Congress, and for now, construction has to stop. Let's bring in ABC's Stephen Portnoy for more. Stephen, take us through this ruling and how President Trump is responding.
Well, the president, of course, is responding, and he's expected to appeal. But the ruling has Judge Richard Leon, a George W. Bush appointee, saying the president's not the owner of the White House, that he's a steward of the White House for future generations of first families.
At a time where Donald Trump is facing mounting pressure politically, he is taking hit after hit in the courts. A federal judge just blocked a Trump-backed effort to allow churches to endorse political candidates without losing their tax-exempt status. Now, what makes this even more significant isn't the decision, but who made the decision. The judge who blocked the move was a Trump appointee. He ruled that the court did not even have the authority to approve the agreement, effectively shutting the door on the administration's attempts to carve out an exception. And that matters, right? Because it's not like this is opposition from political rivals. It's rejection from within the very system that Trump is trying to shape.
Concept that creates allegiance. That's
General, you said in your reply brief that the children of slaves who were brought here unlawfully, in defiance of laws forbidding the slave trade, would in fact be citizens. And we can imagine that their parents were not only brought here in violation of United States law, but were here against their will, and so maybe felt allegiance to the countries where they were from. And you say that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to put all slaves on equal footing, newly freed slaves on equal footing, and so they would be citizens. But that's not textual. So how do you get there? You say it in just a few sentences, so can you elaborate?
Sure. If you look at I think if you look at the 19th century sources, what you see is that even though their entry may have been unlawful, 19th century antebellum law never treated their presence as unlawful. In fact, quite the opposite. One of the
United States Supreme Court hearing arguments for and against what's called birthright citizenship. By the way, we're told the president of the United States, President Trump, has just left the Supreme Court, heading back in his motorcade to the White House. He was there when John Sauer, the Solicitor General, was making his case against birthright citizenship. But now Cecilia Wang, the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, is making the opposite case against the Trump administration. Trump has gone back to the White House, isn't hearing this part, at least not in person.
And this ruling doesn't stand alone either. It actually fits into a broader pattern of legal setbacks that he's facing just this week. He faced a major setback at the Supreme Court over his attempt to end birthright citizenship, one of the most high-profile legal battles of his presidency so far. That case was supposed to reshape immigration policy at a fundamental level, and instead, it ended in what appears to be a clear rejection from justices that he helped appoint, despite his attempts to manipulate the situation by showing up to said hearing. According to reports, Trump abruptly exited the Supreme Court on Wednesday after some of his own conservative justices did not appear convinced by his bid to upend birthright citizenship in America.
Obama and Biden, I don't care how good your case is. You can have the greatest case ever. They're going to rule against you. They always do. And it's not supposed to be that way. Now, the Republicans tend to be very different. They want to show how honorable they are. So a man can appoint them and they can rule against him. It's so proud of it. We're so proud we ruled against Trump. We're so proud. We're above it. There are those that say that's wonderful, and there are those that say they're so stupid. But the Democrats never fail at one thing. When Barack Hussein Obama or when Biden appoints somebody, they go along that line. You can have the greatest case in history. And almost, I guess I have to say almost, maybe I don't have to say it, almost without fail, those people, 4 of them, sometimes 5 of them, but 4 of them will vote against you. You don't have a chance. You don't have a chance. And that's not what the court system is. Now, the Republican appointees tend to go, and this has been long before me. This has been for many years. Some people would call it stupidity. Some people would call it disloyal. Some people would say they're right in doing it. And I don't mind being right, but the other side almost never does it.
Trump made the unprecedented decision to sit in on oral arguments, staring down the court's 9 justices as they quizzed his lawyers on one of the most consequential constitutional questions. Man, that's a tongue twister. Whether all children born in the United States can continue to automatically receive citizenship. But after just more than an hour of watching several of his own handpicked justices tear apart his arguments, the president left. And of course had a Truth Social post to partner that meltdown, as he said, "We're the only country in the world stupid enough," capital stupid, "to allow birthright citizenship." Now, that's not even close to being true. There are dozens of countries who confer citizenship with birth, no conditions attached. I mean, the idea that this is some uniquely American loophole is just simply incorrect, as is his claim that he can end birthright citizenship with executive action. Legal experts across the spectrum disagree with this because birthright citizenship is rooted in the 14th Amendment, which guarantees citizenship to those born in the United States. And almost every lower court that has reviewed Trump's order has concluded it violates that constitutional protection. In other words, it's not a policy that you can just change with the swish of a pen. It's a constitutional question. And Trump's argument hinges on a reinterpretation of the very phrase subject to jurisdiction of the United States. But the thing is, the Supreme Court already addressed this more than a century ago. In the 1898 case of the United States versus Wong Kim Ark, the court affirmed that the children born in the US, even to non-citizen parents, are citizens. That precedent has stood for over 120 years. And it's the foundation of current law. But, well, since when does this president think the law applies to him?
This in your opening, that if we agree with you on how to read Wong Kim Ark, then you win. So that could be if we did agree with you on Wong Kim Ark, that could be just a short opinion, right? That says the better reading is respondent's reading. Government doesn't ask us to overrule, affirmed.
Yes.
That's that. Then last question, though, why would we?
And all that being said, the president was forced to then sit silently as justices, including, as I mentioned, several of his own appointees, openly criticized the legal foundation of his claims, some of them in brutal fashion. I mean, in one of the most telling moments, Justice Neil Gorsuch, who was also appointed by Trump, asked Trump's Solicitor General John Sawyer, "Do you think that Native Americans are birthright citizens under your test?" And his response was far from resounding.
Do you think Native Americans today are birthright citizens under your test and under your friend's test?
I think so. I mean, obviously, they've been granted citizenship by statute.
Put aside the statute. Do you think they're birthright citizens?
No, I think the clear understanding that everybody agrees in the congressional debates is that the children of tribal Indians are not birthright citizens.
I understand that's what they said. But your test is the domicile of the parents. And that would be the test you'd have us apply today, right?
Yes. So if a tribal Indian, for example, gives up allegiance to...
Born today, birthright citizens.
I think so on our test. Yeah, if they're lawfully domiciled here.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I have to think that through. But that's my reaction.
I'll take the yes. That's all right.
Chief Justice Roberts, another Conservative on the bench, he dropped the coldest line of the hearing when Sawyer tried to make the point that we're in a new world. Roberts replied, "It's a new world. It's the same Constitution."
500 birth tourism companies in the People's Republic of China whose business is to bring people here to give birth and return to that nation.
Having said all that, you do agree that that has no impact on the legal analysis before us?
I think it's, I'd quote what Justice Scalia said in his Hamdan dissent, where their interpretation has these implications that could not possibly have been approved by the 19th century framers of this amendment. I think that shows that they've made a mess. Their interpretation has made a mess of the provision.
Well, it certainly wasn't a problem in the 19th century.
No, but of course, we're in a new world now, as Justice Alito pointed out, to where 8 billion people are one plane ride away from having a child who's a U.S. citizen.
Well, it's a new world. It's the same Constitution.
It is.
But the L's that Trump seems to be taking do more than just cast doubt over his individual policies, right? They undermine a central argument that Trump is able to deliver on the agenda that he campaigns on and can basically do what he wants free from reprieve. Because when courts are repeatedly intervening, including justices appointed by Republicans, it sends a signal, right? This isn't just partisan disputes. They are legal failures. And when those failures stack up one after the other, it becomes harder to argue that the problem is the opposition rather than the policy itself. And Trump showing up, it's representative of a president in deep political trouble.
You could replay the tapes of all of the Republicans that have been critical of this, or at least had some very serious questions that I think is fair when your country is engaged in a war that hasn't been pitched, sold to the American public, and when the approval is so low. And what I think about this evening's address is that the president is frustrated by the other messengers who have been out here talking about this, that he gets the feedback that the goals have not been properly communicated, that the American public doesn't understand why he went in, why he did it this way, what we have accomplished and what the exit strategy is, and that he thinks he is his best advocate and the best advocate for the American military and for our mission there. And so he's out there doing it. And the 4 goals that have been outlined, at least in what they leaked to the press, are even different from what Secretary Rubio said just 2 days ago. Because on Rubio's list, he did not have anything about a nuclear weapon. And that's back on the list, because that is the most important thing. That's the thing that people can identify with, where you say you can't have a nuclear Iran. Now, a lot of swirl about what the JCPOA had gotten us and whether we could have done a deal that was reminiscent of that, plus some extra checks. I know that there are critics of that deal, even on the Democratic side. That's out there, but he is undoubtedly being forced into this position because of, and he poo-pooed it, but over $4 for gas. His approval rating in now every poll that we've seen this week is in the 30s. We're not even talking about the low 40s. The CNN poll, he's minus 24 with men, minus 2 with white voters who don't have a college degree, minus 17 with seniors, and 65% say that his policies are making their economic conditions worse. That is unsustainable. Not even if you're thinking about a midterm. You just can't go through the rest of an administration like that.
A president with declining approval ratings across the board, internal Republican divisions, as we've seen with MAGA Mike going against his call to make no deals with Democrats, military leaders questioning the Iran war, and resignations inside the administration. Now you go ahead and add legal defeats. What were you saying again about losers?
I always like to hang around with losers, actually, because it makes me feel better.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to add the MeidasTouch podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new updates every single day.